Okay, I'm going to start just so I can get you to your drinks on time, most importantly. Unfortunately, no. Good evening. Welcome to the HPQ and EPQ information evening. My name is Rachel Kempton, if I haven't met you, and I am the coordinator for both the HPQ and the EPQ. So thank you for taking the time to be here this evening, and I hope it will give you a better understanding of the qualification and how your child is most importantly going to be supported through this journey. I will be talking about both qualifications this evening, just so that because they are very similar, there is some crossover. Come on in, no worries, we've only just started. And we are recording, so that I will be sending out the recording to those parents who can't be here today. So just bear with me as I clarify those differences between the two. But it's also going to be helpful for those of you who are Year 9 parents for what might be to come when you get to Year 12. So just to give you a bit of an outline of what to expect this evening. So we're just going to go through in more detail what the qualification actually is, because I know the letters might not mean much to you, so we're just going to clarify what that means. And then I'm going to explain my role as a coordinator and the role of my colleagues as supervisors. I'll then outline the expectations of the students and how you can support them from home. And finally, we'll have some time for some questions, but hopefully I'll have covered most of what you need to know at this stage. So the HPQ and EPQ stands for the Higher or Extended Project Qualification, and it counts for half a GCSE or an A-level respectively. For the EPQ students, there's a very strong possibility that having this on their UCAS application will actually adjust their university offers. So, for example, the university might be asking for an AAA, but with an EPQ will lower their offer to an AAB or even an ABB, is what we've seen in the past. And this is because the skill set gained is essential to that further education. The students will be taught that for HPQ as well, that skill set, and it will give them the opportunity to build on and enhance those skills at EPQ. The HPQ and EPQ will allow students to learn how to research for academic study and analyse the sources that they find. They will learn how to present that research through sophisticated academic writing, and we will teach them the importance of referencing and how to produce a reference list. Furthermore, they will practice skills such as time management, goal setting, self-evaluation and reflection, and the course will culminate in a presentation given to their peers and teachers, another skill for further education and beyond. So the EPQ and HPQ are focused mainly on the process of producing either an essay of 2,000 or 5,000 words or an artefact. And an artefact can be anything. I think Mr. Valence's favourite artefact is an MOT certificate. Mrs. Hinds' favourite artefact is a fully sustainable wardrobe. My favourite artefact is the lighting design for Grease for our Whole School Musical a couple of years ago. So basically, the possibilities are endless. And ultimately, as long as that artefact is based on research, anything can go. And alongside the artefact, the students will need to produce a 500 or 1,000 word minimum write-up of the process. So this is the assessment objectives and how it's weighted. So the weighting of each assessment objective gives you an indicator of how important the process is compared to the product produced. So AO3 is assessing the development and realisation of the project, so the creation of the product. And this is weighted at 40%. However, it's also assessing the students' ability to problem solve and make critical decisions, as well as demonstrate their ability to follow their plan. So AO1, 2 and 4 are looking at project management, research skills and evaluation skills, adding up to 60% of the final mark. So the actual product is probably weighted at only about 20%. We are so much more interested in the process of how they get to that point rather than what they create. So it might be that the student has written a brilliant essay or made a fantastic artefact, but actually it means very little if they haven't demonstrated the ability to manage their time well or be organised or reflect on their strengths and weaknesses. And finally, and most importantly, the HPQ and EPQ are designed for students to work fully independently. I cannot stress that enough. It must be their own ideas, their own research, their own work. And if you take nothing else away from this evening, please just make sure that you're fully aware this is absolutely independent work. The students are very sick of me saying it, so it's only fair that you guys are too. So just to make it super clear, just in case, this is what the HPQ says from the specification. will require the teaching of relevant planning, organisational skills, project management and study and presentation skills, and a piece of independent work undertaken by the learner. And this work will be guided and overseen by the learner supervisor and monitored by the coordinator and internally assessed by the centre. And similarly for EPQ, will involve some teaching of the necessary skills, supervision and assessment of the progress, and it will involve an extended autonomous work by the student. So there is a difference in the way that the EPQ and HPQ are delivered, aligning with the difference in the wording for these two specifications. The HPQ students will be receiving, or are receiving, weekly lessons throughout the year, and the taught sessions for the EPQ students will stop at Christmas. By then, the EPQ students will have received teaching on research, project management, academic writing and referencing. So even if a student decides not to continue with the EPQ, the skills taught will stand them in good stead for university study as well as employment. These taught sessions will become independent sessions where I'll be around to give support, but it will be up to the student to use this time how they would like. This is very similar in the HPQ. Some of those HPQ taught sessions will be independent study. I will say, you've got an hour, you need to work on your project, over to you. If they choose to use that time, chatting to their friends, playing computer games, that sort of thing, that's their decision. It's fully independent work, it's fully independent time management. It's over to them. I will not be pushing them. I will not be telling them to stay on task. I'm not allowed to do that as a coordinator. The supervisor is also not allowed to do that, and I'll explain a little bit further about that soon. But just so you're aware, fully independent work. The main thing to take away from both these specifications is the focus on independent work. It needs to be the student's project, but we are there to guide them. So with that in mind, each student will have a supervisor to guide them through this project. So the HPQ students will have already chosen a supervisor, and the EPQ students won't choose until after half term. This year we've done it slightly different, and I've given the students a list of trained supervisors to choose from. These members of staff will meet with their student when the student requests a meeting. I'm expecting this to happen roughly 3 times a half term, depending on where we are in the process. Sometimes it might be more, sometimes it might be less. But at a minimum, the student should be meeting with their supervisor at these 4 stages. So firstly, a meeting to discuss the record of initial ideas. So kind of in the next, I think I've said before half term, the students need to meet with their supervisor and explain what their ideas are, what their thought process is. A planning review. So once their proposal for their project has been accepted, they will then meet with the supervisor, explain what their plan is for the rest of the time. A mid-term review, so about halfway through that time, they're going to sit with their supervisor, see where they're at. Are they on task? Are they not on task? What do they need to do to make that more, to use their time more well, more focused? And then a product review. So right at the very end of the process, they'll sit and review their whole project and their product. The supervisor is the primary marker of the student's project. They will be assessing the project holistically and all throughout the process. Each stage of the project will be signed off by the supervisor once the student has confirmed that they are happy with their work to date. And this all happens on the magical Project Q. This is what Project Q looks like. So each student has an account and it's linked with their supervisor, so the supervisor can see everything that they're writing up here. And once this Project Q is completed, we download it and send it off to AQA, and that is their official paperwork, and it's really important that it's filled out correctly. So this is Sarah Jane's HPQ Project Q. Sarah Jane did an artifact. She was the one who did a fully sustainable wardrobe. Fantastic project, fantastic presentation. She came out with a really strong A-star. So as you can see, this is where we're at the moment with our HPQ students and our EPQ students, is we're on the first tab, the first section, the record of initial ideas. They should start to have some information, some ideas in this first box where it says my ideas for topic or title. We're looking for about 3 different ideas at the moment. This is so when they start doing their research, they might come to a point where the project that they've picked doesn't actually have enough research to do their essay on. So they come back to the drawing board, they start again with another one of their initial ideas and follow that initial research down. Hopefully that will spark some ideas, that will spark some thought, and they can take that through to their whole project. So starting with 3 or 4 just allows a bit of flexibility in those initial stages. Once Sarah Jane has completed her ideas for topic and title. She'll move on to her research and development of the project. So how is she going to complete the project? How does she envision herself completing the project? Sarah Jane was very, very thorough. She's explained exactly what she wants to do by the time spring term has begun, by the time half term begins, all the way through to the spring holiday. She's explained her objectives and her aims. She's put loads of detail in there. Once she's finished both of those boxes, she's gone and spoken to her supervisor. Now, the supervisor has orally given some feedback, some comments and advice on how that she might want to modify her project, which she's outlined here. So things like for her survey that she wants to carry out, she needs to ask a variety of people with different ages and backgrounds so that her results are fair and balanced. Her supervisor advised that she should avoid shopping online for fabrics to avoid the pollution of delivery, remembering the ethical and environmental check of the garment, etc. Following that conversation, she is then going to fill in this box, which is the modification she has made as a result of her discussion with her supervisor. So she is going to tell us how she's adjusted her project based on that conversation. And this is where we start to see that feedback, that application of feedback, her self-reflection, her self-evaluation, her problem-solving, all of those skills start to come into effect here. So she's completely changed the title and the focus of her project after analysing how long it would take her over the Christmas holidays to gather all the information she was going to need. So what Sarah Jane did was she had this massive project that she wanted to achieve, and it was too big. It was too big for 2,000 words. It was too big for 6 months. It was more of a PhD project. So it was a case of let's shrink this down. Let's focus on what we can actually achieve in the time that we've got. And so that's where she came out and adjusted her project. Once she's finished that and she's happy with everything that she's put in, she's going to sign it off at the bottom, date completed. So she finished that on the 8th of December. So just so you're getting a bit of a time frame in your mind, we're not expecting this to be done until November sort of time. The supervisor will then have a read through. If they're happy with how much detail they've got, they're going to sign it off, and they get a very satisfying red tick in the box to say, yep, that's locked in, that's done. You cannot go back and change it. It's really important that the students realise that Project Q is a live document that continues and goes with them, so going back and changing things isn't going to help them because they need to show that they've reflected on what they've done before and made the modifications based on that, rather than, oh, I'm going to look really perfect by changing everything. So when it comes to the first draft of that essay, just while we're on the subject of our supervisors are not allowed to mark an essay like you would expect them to mark an essay, especially that first draft. That once the student has finished their first draft of an essay, what I expect to happen is a discussion on that essay orally and say, actually, you need to just double check your spelling or your grammar. Your argument isn't coming across quite well here. Go back and have a think about how to strengthen it. Your conclusion isn't quite clear enough. Can we think about a way to incorporate everything that you've said? Those sorts of things. They're not going to get a big, lots of red scribble all over their essay. Again, it's all about that independent work and looking at making sure that they're submitting something that is completely their own and something that they have reflected on and improved themselves with the guidance of their supervisor. And as a supervisor, we are not allowed to chase the students. We cannot organise the meetings for them. If they forget to go to their meeting, they're not going to get an email from their supervisor saying, you missed our meeting, when shall we redo it? They need to be organised and on top of it enough to know when that meeting is, to turn up to that meeting coming prepared. We can't remind them to complete their project queue. We can't tell them what they need to be doing. The more help we give them, the less marks they get. It comes back to that independent work of the case of the more support they get, the more help, the more guidance, the less it's their work, so the less marks they're going to get. Is that kind of clear? Are we getting the idea that it's independent? So, as mentioned at the start of this session, I am the centre coordinator, and this means that I am delivering the taught sessions to Year 9 and Year 12, where they will learn the essential skills needed to complete their projects. During this time, I'm also able to give one-to-one guidance to some extent, but that should mainly be coming from the supervisor. I absolutely love teaching the HPQ and EPQ. It's my favourite hour of the week. I just love finding out about the students, hearing what they're passionate about, seeing where their projects go. So I do have lots of discussions with them individually on where they're at, just because I find it really interesting, exciting. But mainly it's going to come from the supervisor. My role also includes the management of the supervisors, so I'm going to be delivering AQA certified training regularly throughout the year and meeting with each of them meeting with them each half term to check the students' progress and highlight any concerns. I will also be approving each project proposal and ensuring that that project extends the students' programme of study, as well as moderating the marking for each project. So what I mean by extending the students' programme of study is that the students need to be taking this EPQ or HPQ outside of what they're learning in the classroom. It might be that Mr. Phillips has mentioned something about Russia that they find really interesting, but actually they're not going to study Russia in their Year 9, Year 12 GCSE A-level syllabus. So that's absolutely fine for them to go out and find more and research more about Russia. But if they're looking at World War II England, and that's exactly what their GCSE study is about, that's where we have this dual accreditation, and we're not expanding their horizons, they're not learning more, they're not researching themselves, they're taking what they're learning from class and applying it to their project. So by saying extending the students' programme study, we're taking it one step further than what we would do inside the classroom. And furthermore, I'm going to be reviewing and evaluating assessment practice, including the feedback from AQA, each year to ensure that we are working to high standards and accuracy. And finally, I'm also not allowed to chase your students because it is independent work. I can't, just as like the supervisors, I cannot ask them to complete the work. I cannot tell them what they should be doing in the lessons with their free time. I cannot be saying you need to complete Project Q. It needs to be completely down to them. So we have covered the role of the supervisor and the role of the coordinator, and in doing so, I hope you've started to get a bit of an idea as to what the students are expected and need to be doing. But just in case, independent study. It is an essential skill for GCSE, A-level, university study, employment, and it is such a great opportunity to start practicing it now. And it is a big adjustment for students. We recognise how difficult this is, especially in Year 9. So we are going to support them as much as we can without compromising their mark. But for the Year 12 students, it is much more hands-off. So a change that we have made this year is that we are going to be giving the students a list of dates to use as a guide that will keep them on track. This is subject to change as AQA haven't released the May 2023 submission date yet. So the guide is based on last year's submission date. So this list has been given to both HPQ and EPQ students. With the EPQ students, they do have the option to submit in November or May, the following May. But obviously we want to avoid the May 24 submission because it will clash with their A-level revision and exams. For HPQ, we want a May 2023 submission. Sometimes that doesn't happen, and that's okay, that's fine. But for the HPQ, they don't have a November submission date. So if they do want to complete it and they're not going to hit that May 2023, we can submit the following May, so May 24. But again, that will start to clash with their GCSE revision and exams and things like that. It's not impossible. No, it won't, because you're 9 at the moment, aren't they? Yeah. So it will feed into their GCSEs. It won't clash with their exams, but just something to be aware of. That workload will go up. They also won't have their taught sessions, so it will have to be outside of lesson time. We do run a HPQ and EPQ extended day activity, which will continue for as long as we run the qualification. So there is that option, but we're aiming to get that May 23 submission date in. And this list of dates is a guide and it's not a requirement. I will not, again, be chasing the students if they haven't completed these tasks to the date suggested at any point. I'm not allowed. Their supervisor isn't allowed. And ultimately, it's a fantastic opportunity for the students to demonstrate their ability to manage their time, or at very least, reflect on how they could have managed it better, which is often the case. So I will be sending that list of dates out to you as well, just so that you are aware of where your student should be working to when we send out the recording next week. And finally, we come to your role. We recognise how much you want your child to succeed in this, and we are so grateful to you for recognising the merit in HPQ and EPQ. And as a parent or a carer, you can be as hands-on or as hands-off as you would like to at home. If you would like your child to fully embrace the experience of the HPQ and EPQ, you can absolutely leave them to it and encourage that independent work from home. You will need to be prepared for things to maybe go wrong, and that's okay. As their supervisors, as the coordinator, I expect things to go slightly wrong. I expect them to change their mind halfway through. I expect them to hit a dead wall with their research. I expect them to let the project fall to the bottom of the priority list as workload or parties or whatever it was comes in and creeps its way up to the top of the priority list. But it's how they recover that is most important and what we're interested in. Remembering that the process is the key and their ability to evaluate and reflect on their performance rather than how good the essay or the artefact is. You can absolutely take an interest in what they're doing, but if you want to try and take a back seat as they learn the importance of that skill set and how to develop it from themselves. Alternatively, you can absolutely be a little bit more hands-on and check in regularly. Remind them of the deadlines, ask where they're up to, what they're doing, but what you can't do is you can't do the project for them. And you might smile, but you'll be surprised. And as teachers, we can absolutely tell when they've had a little bit of parental help from home. You need to be mindful of how much evidence we will have, how much written evidence we will have at the end of the project. Their journals, their project cues, their presentations, and if the language used in the essay or the write-up doesn't match up to what we're seeing elsewhere, then there's a strong possibility that the overall project mark could be negatively affected. So if we look at the assessment criteria, if it is believed that a student has received additional assistance and that this is acceptable within the guidelines for the specification, then the supervisor should award a mark which represents the student's unaided achievement. So we are only going to be marking the work that is clearly their own. So if they submit an essay that is using really sophisticated language, writing in a way that they wouldn't normally talk, and it's completely throughout the whole essay, there's a strong possibility we just won't submit the essay or we won't mark the essay in the same sort of way. And the JCQ, so the Joint Council for Qualifications, give guidelines on how to complete coursework correctly, as well as examinations, etc. They're the people who tell us how to run our exams and our assessments. This is what they say about parental involvement with coursework, which in this case relates to the HPQ and EPQ. So you can encourage your child to spend time on their coursework and to think about it as early as possible. You should discuss with their child what they're planning and the timing of the work. You may provide your children with access to resource materials and discuss the coursework. However, you must not give direct advice on what should or should not be included. And a child who needs more specific help should be encouraged to speak to his or her teacher. So please be aware of this as you assist your child. Ultimately, it comes down to some form of plagiarism, etc. And that's exactly what we're trying to teach them, the importance of avoiding. So in order to support and aid your support at home, we are now putting the stages of the HPQ and EPQ on Doddle, which will align with the Project Q tabs. Once they have completed a tab on Project Q, we will Doddle them with an amber so you can see what your child has completed. You can then check this against the deadline guide and decide whether or not you need to encourage them more to complete some work. So Doddle in this case, I think much to Mr. Valence's dismay, is not going to be used as an assessment tool. It's more going to be used as a marker of where they are up to in the process. So as I said, we are not allowed to chase them. If we've said your proposal needs to be in by the 9th of December and it's not in, I'm not going to remind them. I'm not going to tell them, go and do your project proposal over Christmas. If it doesn't come in to me until March, then we're in trouble. And it's at those points where your child hopefully isn't, but if your child is falling really behind and it's getting to a point where it's not going to be likely that they'll complete their project, at least either at all or to a decent standard, then I'll absolutely be getting into contact with you and having those discussions as to how we move forward. I don't want you to think that I'm just going to sit on the back seat and not have a conversation. I'm absolutely going to have those conversations with you if we need to. But the idea is that we avoid as much extra support as we can. So we need to work together, myself, you, the students, in order to be successful in this. So I appreciate this has been a lot of information. Hopefully, some of it is useful and has given you a better understanding of all of our roles as we support the students through this project. It really is a fantastic qualification. I cannot recommend it enough. I hope you will see such a fantastic skill set come out of your children as they go through the HPQ, which they can build on at the EPQ. And when they get to university, if they're doing the EPQ, you know, they'll just be so well prepared for what's coming. When I did my EPQ, I hated every single second of it. I was moaning, I was crying, why am I doing this? This is horrible. And I got my first week of university, I was like, this is why I'm doing it. And I was so much more prepared than the other students that I was with, and it just made such a big difference to my experience. And it's the same thing with GCSE. There will be coursework involved. There will be some independent work. So if we can nail down these skills now in year 9, we're going to be in such a better position when it comes for year 10 and year 11. So yeah, thank you for listening. Can I answer any questions? Yes.
You're going to send some dates through for the HPQ. Will you be doing the same for EPQ?
Yes, yeah. So the EPQ students have been given the same dates as the HPQ students, as we're aiming for a May 23 entry. I'm also going to send them an adapted one if we're going to go for a November entry, but I won't be doing it for May 24 because I don't want to encourage that.
For the EPQ, that's November.
Yes. 23. Yeah, if we can get it in for May 23, that would be ideal, but I think sometimes the summer holidays are really helpful, so that's fine, we can do that. Yeah. Anyone else?
Have they started the actual HPQ lessons?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we're on lesson 4 on Friday. So what we've covered so far is thinking about what we might want to do our projects on, so our initial ideas. So I've asked them things like, what do you like, what are your favourite subjects at school, what do you do outside of school, hobbies, anything that just generally piques your interest that you're curious on. And we've started to look at where we can take those. So on Friday we're looking at actually how to research and what to look out for. So things like making sure that we're not copying from Wikipedia, learning how to use Google Scholar, journals and things like that. So we'll start the actual research process as of Friday, and I'll be guiding them through that pretty much up until Christmas.
Do they actually make a decision on whether they're going to do it at a certain stage?
So for the HPQ students, they have signed up for the year. If we get halfway through this term and we realise that it's not for them, then there's time to change subjects, but obviously you would have to work in the block because it's timetabled lessons. With the EPQ students, they make that decision at Christmas as to whether or not they're going to continue. Is that yeah, perfect. Yeah.
If you can see that they would benefit to go somewhere like a museum or this, and you look at the parent, are you then interfering?
No, that's absolutely fine. That's absolutely fine. So you can give them access to those research materials. So you can absolutely take them to a museum, take them to see a film or whatever. It's just a case of not going around the exhibit and saying, oh, copy that bit down and take that bit and make sure you've got that leaflet and we'll buy this book, that sort of thing. So it's a case of guiding them and supporting them, but once they're in that museum or whatever, that they're able to access the information and recognise what they're trying to get from that. Does that make sense? Yeah, yeah. I mean, it might be that they found the exhibition that they want to go to. That is brilliant. If they find that and say, actually, Mum, can we go there? Then 100% that would be great. Obviously, you know, you need to book it and things. But if you see something that you think, oh, that might be quite helpful for them, then you can absolutely take that and do that yourselves. Yeah. No. We're more looking at this guidance which is, for not trying to sound too naughty, that is obviously not done by them. So if there's anything that's written in the essay that doesn't match up.
It's more about looking at the actual content that you're doing.
Exactly, yeah, 100%. So it's just, I think you can use your judgment as to how much support you're giving them. If I can tell that they've had some extra, like, if they're in class and they're sitting on their surface, not really doing anything, and then next lesson they come back with thousands of fancy words, then I'm like, that doesn't quite add up. But it's that sort of thing, really. It's about how much of it is them being motivated and interested enough to do it compared to being pushed from home. It needs to be their work. It's much more beneficial to them if we leave them to it as much as we can. Any other questions? Yeah.
Is there any benefits of going to the extended day club then, other than using that just as study time?
Yeah, I mean, because the way that we deliver the taught sessions is more kind of like a lecture, so it's more a case of I give them the information that they need and then give them time to apply that information that they've given. The EPQ, HPQ session can be used as, almost like prep time as like a guided, this is the time that I'm going to hollow out of my timetable in order to do my work because I can't do it at home or whatever it is. But also it's myself and Mrs Hinds who was centre coordinator last year, so we're both trained in that. She's running it at the moment, so she'll be able to give further guidance. If there's something that they didn't understand and they didn't want to maybe ask in class or didn't have time to ask in class or just want to check something, then they can go to that extended day and do it that way. So they'll have a little bit more guidance. Not so much that it's going to affect their marks, so don't feel like that's going to come up against them, but it's just that idea of, okay, just having someone there to ask a question is sometimes quite reassuring. And again, if we are taking our HPQ into year 10, I'd 100% recommend going to that each week until the project's done. Excellent. Okay, well, I'm going to hang around in the foyer if there's anything else that you want to ask regarding your child exactly, and hopefully 1802, so just in time to arrive fashionably late at, I think your Drake Hall this evening. Yeah, excellent. So I hope you have a really good rest of your evening, and thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate your time. All right, no worries. Thank you.